Now it's on. Thanks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, my name is Franziska Freiburghaus. I'm the regional head of sustainable development at the embassy, at the Swiss embassy in Abu Dhabi. I guide you through the evening tonight or through our event today. The program is that we start with some introductory words from our ambassadors, and then we have a panel discussion of about, we will see 1 hour. This is including questions and answers. So we are looking forward to really a lively exchange and discussion. And then we come to the second part of the evening. This is a voluntary guided tour through the Swiss Pavilion for the ones who are interested, and followed by an informal dinner. We have 2 objectives tonight. The first is to identify best practices on clean air with relevant actors from the UAE, the EU and Switzerland, tonight with a special focus on the perspective of the private sector. And the second objective is to network, exchange and enjoy. So, Excellency, Ambassador of Switzerland, Massimo Bacci, please.
Dear friends, good evening. It's such a big pleasure to have you here this evening and to make the Swiss Pavilion that much alive. At the Expo, by the way, which is equally a success. It's a big pleasure to have you here and to continue our discussion on air quality beyond border. Happy to do that with you and with our best friends of the European Union as well. I would like to thank you, Andrea, the ambassador of the European Union, for being here with us this evening. It's a particular pleasure because, as you know, Switzerland is probably, I say probably because Andrea is here with us, but otherwise I say certainly the most European of all the European countries. We have extremely strong, diversified and rich relationship with the European Union. Very often we have no idea where is our border when we cross to France, Italy, Germany or Austria. The relationship is extremely intense in both ways, and as far as the topic of this evening is concerned, and mainly transportation, our relationship is particularly a success story. The European Union has a few bilateral treaties on transportation with a very limited number of countries, but you have one with Switzerland since 2002. And maybe you don't know, but when I started my career as a young diplomat, I was in an office in Switzerland dealing with the European integration. And after Switzerland refused to join the European Economic Area, 6th of December 92, we negotiated a few bilateral agreements with the European Union, and this is one of those. We started just after this vote, and it entered into force in 2002. So Switzerland is relatively slow, but very efficient at the end, I would say. And I would say mainly transportation and is a success story for us that we would like very much to highlight this evening also. Because one of the results of this policy that we implemented in Switzerland was the construction of 3 major tunnels through the Alps, which represent a major contribution to the implementation of the European policy on trans-European networks. And now in Switzerland, we transport 2/3 of our goods on rail and 1/3 only on road. This is, believe me, a major achievement, and we are very much proud of that. This is a contribution that we share in Europe. We have many partnership on many other areas, and I think that this evening it will come out very much thanks to our panelists. That also I would like very much to to be here with us and to highlight us this evening. I think that I will stop here. Again, I would like to thank you all for making this event possible. This is exactly the way we would like to contribute to the success of Expo 2020 Dubai. You may know that Switzerland not only was the very first country which confirmed participation to Expo, which was, I think, very much appreciated. We did the same in Milan, by the way, in 2015. And I tell you, when you have to organize such a mega event, it is important to immediately be able to count on the participation of country that believe in your project. For this specific Expo, I'd like to highlight the fact that Switzerland is also chairing the steering committee of all participating countries. That give us a kind of a privileged relationship with our friend of Expo 2020 Dubai. I think that an Expo is certainly not a fair. We are not here to sell anything, but we are here to try to shape a few messages that will in return make our life easier and better in the future, and certainly for the next generation. And I think that today, this evening, this is the contribution that we are giving to all that. So thank you very much again, and I think I can hand over the floor to my best friends, Andrea, Ambassador of the Delegation of the European Union in Abu Dhabi. Thank you, Andrea.
Sorry, Ambassador, and just wipe the microphone because we only have one, sorry. But, yeah, please.
Now you have to wipe it again.
No, I was not
joking.
so close.
I'm joking. So good evening, everybody, and first allow me to thank Switzerland, Ambassador Baggi and his team, and the Pavilion for hosting this event jointly today. And as Massimo said, Switzerland and the EU share history, geography, language, culture, and political values. And it was very nice to see the Ambassador of Switzerland framed by the European and the Swiss flag. And I think that we also work together on the international stage on many global issues like human rights and multilateralism, but also on the topic of today, which is air quality and climate change, in particular in the transport sector. So before I continue with my intervention, I just wanted to stop 1 second and ask you to breathe very deeply and exhale and think about the importance of air for you as human beings. And air quality is very important, and air pollution is very hard to escape, no matter where you live. The pollution of the air can seriously affect your health and the environment around you. And you should know, maybe you know, that air pollution leads to an estimated 7 million premature deaths around the world. So it's a global problem that needs global solution. Also in the EU, 1 in 8 deaths are linked to environmental pollution, and this shows that we have to do more to solve this problem. Air pollution also affects nature, and it's one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss, and it threatens the survival of more than 1 million species on the planet. There is a lot of synergy between air quality and climate policy, and that is very much an EU priority, because the same measures that we promote to improve air quality also bring benefit in terms of climate policy. And of course, climate change and air pollution are closely related. Today's event is focusing on transport and logistics, and we're going to hear from the colleagues here what they are doing in order to reduce emissions in the transport sector and improve the quality of the air that we all breathe. And although air pollution from transport has decreased in the last years and decades, still air pollutant concentrations are very high, and transport represents almost a quarter of Europe's greenhouse gas emissions, and is the main cause of air pollution in our cities. So for that, the transport sector remains a major obstacle to realizing the EU climate goals. Cars, vans, trucks are, together with buses, responsible for more than 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. And the remainder comes from the shipping industry and aviation, which will also need substantial transformation towards decarbonization. So that's just to introduce the dimensions of the problem. So what is the EU doing to green the transport sector? So we have several ideas and policies. So first of all, we promote the decarbonization of the transport sector, which is central to achieving our goal to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And we are committed to a transport sector that is future-proof for carbon neutrality by creating a market for sustainable fuels and technologies. Also, we intend to reduce the external cost of the transport sector, and the main strands of activity there are shifting to less polluting transport, more efficient modes of transport, more sustainable transport technologies, more sustainable transport fuels and infrastructure, and making sure that transport prices reflect the adverse effects on the environment and on our health. Ahead of COP26, which, as you know, takes place at the end of the month in Glasgow, the European Commission has proposed a comprehensive package, which is our proposal to the COPs, called Fit for 55, that encapsulates our goals to reduce our emissions by 55% before 2030. And these proposals are also beneficial for air quality. So we will promote stricter CO2 emission standards for cars and vans, especially in urban areas. And also we will promote the uptake of zero emission vehicles. The EU has also adopted a zero pollution action plan for air, water and soil. Igor will like water. One of the latest building blocks of our European Green Deal, which aims to promote a healthier and more efficient and sustainable planet. So with our European Green Deal and the Zero Pollution Action Plan, the EU is stepping up the efforts to protect the health of European citizens and also the health of our planet. But air pollution does not recognize borders, as our Swiss friends probably know, and perhaps they breathe some of the dirty air coming from Milan in Lugano. So we therefore need to deliver internationally. And we need to promote worldwide change for zero pollution around the world, and this is one of our objectives. So improving air quality must be a collective global effort. We can only achieve it if we do it together. And we need policymakers, scientists, and the private sector to share this urgency and to develop a holistic understanding of the best ways to improve air quality for all. If we all join the global race to zero pollution, we will all win. But if the world cannot come together, we all lose. There is no free ride or safe haven from air pollution. Last but not least, science leaves no doubt about the urgency of climate action, and this is why we have to act now. And the motto of the EU Climate Diplomacy Weeks worldwide is ambition and action. We want to inspire our partners through our ambitious climate action, as climate disasters are not only in scientific reports, but they actually happen in real life. And we have seen this summer what has happened with climate disasters in Europe, with Southern Europe burning and Northern Europe affected by floods. So the inevitable impacts of global warming call for our action, and action is what the EU is doing with its EU Green Deal, with its climate law, with its Fit for 55 package, and together with our partners. So I think that Expo 2020 Dubai is the perfect venue to have this discussion and hear the exchange of views from the experts that we have gathered today, because as I highlighted, this objective we can only pursue it if we work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fontana, Ambassador Bacci, for these nice introductory words. Now, and especially also for encouraging us to take a deep breath. I think sometimes we forget that. It's my pleasure now to introduce Tanzid Alam, our moderator, here on my right. He is the Managing Director of Earth Matters Consulting and PricewaterhouseCoopers Advisor. He will brief us on the main findings of the virtual event on 7th of September in support of the UN Day Clean Air for Blue Skies. We held a virtual event, and we are very happy that some of the panelists are among the audience today. And he will moderate the discussion with our 4 panelists that he is going to introduce now. A cordial welcome also from my side to the panelists and to Tanzid.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the kind intro and all the nice words. It's really nice to be here in person instead of looking at people on Zoom screens and telling people to mute or unmute their mics. So it makes a nice change actually, and it just shows how far we have come in the last year and a half or more to be able to have an event like this where the world is convening to discuss an issue as important as air quality. So so without further ado, I wanted to obviously welcome you all. I want this panel discussion to be interactive. We've got questions. Each panelist will have a chance to put forward a few introductory remarks. We'll also have a Q&A with you in the audience. I have a few pre-prepared questions that I wanted to ask the panelists as well, but I'm hoping we have time to hear from different people in the room. I wanted to thank Dr. Diana Francis for coming as well. She was one of the panelists in the last event, as well as some of the colleagues from the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment who are here. Thank you. It's nice to see you, and representing Her Excellency Aisha Al Abduli, who was in the first panel as well. So I want to dive into the next, just a quick summary of what was discussed. Now, there's a image here on screen, and it shows you in effect that air pollution and air quality is a complicated topic with many interrelated issues affecting it. And in the first event on the 7th of September, we covered the policy aspects that govern air quality, whether it's the drivers of it from industry, natural causes of air quality and dust that we heard about in the UAE in this region, as well as the types of policies that can be synergistic to take action on climate change, as well as helping to benefit air quality. So some of what we discussed in that first event was around the solutions that are out there that are already being put forward in Europe, in the European Union and in Switzerland, as well as the UAE. So for example, any policy that can help reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases and move away from fossil fuels as a source of energy also have a co-benefit in terms of reducing pollutants from transport, from industry and so on, which can cause air quality to be poorer. So there's a lot of synergistic areas, and what I'm saying here as well is we're not going to be able to cover all of the topics today. We're focusing in on transport in particular and logistics. So, but obviously air pollution is beyond that. There's indoor air quality as well as outdoor air quality. So the air we're breathing today, it's an indoor, hopefully the air is clean and we're taking a deep breath and it's clean air. But we're not going to be covering these sorts of topics today. We're only really going to be looking at how transportation impacts air quality and hear from industry in particular about the types of solutions that they are implementing, hear about the types of hurdles that they're facing and how they could overcome those hurdles or what they're doing. So we have Ralph Schreiber, who's the head of sales with DHL Global Forwarding for the Middle East and Africa. Ralph, welcome. We also have Serkan Gergen, who's the Senior Sales Director with Swiss Air in the Middle East, North Africa and Turkey. Welcome, Serkan. We have Nahla Nabil, who is the Environment and Safety Manager with Etihad Rail. Thank you for joining, Nahla. And last but not least, we will have Mehta Marashi, who's the Vice President for Sustainability with Borouge, which is a subsidiary of ADNOC, the national oil company of the UAE. So we'll have a very rich discussion, I'm sure, today with each of the speakers. So I'd first like to invite Ralph. You could take the mic in front of you and turn it on, and to give a few opening remarks about what DHL Forwarding do and what are you doing on clean air and climate issues. Thank you.
Yes, it's my pleasure to do so. So welcome, everybody. And the European Green Deal focuses obviously also on the transport sector, and it just makes logical sense to have a large transport provider here in this audience too. So I'm representing Deutsche Post DHL. It's the German post that I would say everyone in this room knows. But just to give a few ideas of the dimension, what we do nowadays, we are 570,000 employees worldwide, out of which 58% is working outside Germany. And we are obviously emitting a lot of CO2 by the services that we provide. We deliver around 48 million letters every day. We have around 5.9 million parcels every day. We have more than 1 million cross-border parcels shipping. And also, when you think about the air freight and ocean freight, we also deliver around 3 million tons of air freight per year, and we ship like 2.9 million containers. And we are represented in more than 200 countries. So I guess it's as global as it gets, yeah. But this is, I think, the trademark of the transport business, that we're really working global, yeah. Obviously, such a size of company comes with responsibilities, in particular when we talk about the environment. And we have quite a history. So we have our first environmental report issued already in 2003. And we already had products like Green Pass, where we are offsetting our CO2 emissions, for example, by planting trees. But this obviously will not bring us to a 2050 carbon neutral transport environment. And there was much more to be done. So we launched this summer our environmental plan, our environmental roadmap, in line with the European Green Deal and Fit for 55, that I will elaborate a little bit more in the questions then later. Yeah. So we take this very serious. We had to quantify, first of all, our CO2 emissions. We had to set then targets for us. And what is really new, and this is different to the environment report we issued before, we established a clear roadmap how to achieve that. And about this roadmap, I will elaborate a little bit more later.
Serkan.
Thank you very much. Also, a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Serkan Gürgü, and I'm responsible for Lufthansa Group Airlines in Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey. And people, if they hear Lufthansa Group, they usually think only about Lufthansa as an airline, but Lufthansa Group, with its 110,000 employees worldwide, encompasses also Swiss International Airlines, Austrian Airlines, Brussels Airlines, Eurowings, and Edelweiss, which is also based in Switzerland. And on top, we have also additional aviation services within our group structure, like for the cargo, the logistics segment, catering, as well as Technique and MRO. Now I would like to particularly come back to Swiss International Airlines, which is the airline of Switzerland, not only the largest airline there, but we're serving more than 100 destinations out of Geneva and Zurich with Swiss International. And therefore, we have also actually embodied the cultural values of Switzerland with our airline. So once you enter a Swiss international airline plane, you will definitely feel from the very first moment like being in Switzerland. But having said this, actually, we are also embodied the corporate responsibility and all our targets to become carbon neutral until 2050, also in our strategies there. On top, we support also the UN agenda with the respective goals, which we want to achieve till 2030. But more details then will follow also during the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serkan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mehta Marashi. I am the Vice President for Sustainability in Borouge. Borouge is a joint venture of Abu Dhabi's national oil company, ADNOC, and Borealis, which is an Austrian-based company, so also a link to Europe. Part of our agenda, of course, climate is, as important as it can be. The UAE recently announced last week as well that we are moving to a carbon neutral environment by 2050, and we're very much aligned to that. Sustainability isn't new for us in the UAE. There's a very famous quote that our forefather, Sheikh Zayed, God rest his soul, said, where the element was that our forefathers lived and breathed in this hostile environment, and they were able to do so by taking only what they want and leaving the rest for future generations. And that is the principles that is embedded in us, whether it's in our personal lives or in our businesses. That is the messages that we take forward to preserve this earth essentially for future generations. You mentioned sustainability reports. So, we published our first sustainability report in Buruj in 2008, 2009. And we continue to do that annually based on the latest GRI standards. We were one of the first petrochemical companies in the region, at least, to publicly announce our 2021 sustainability goals, and that was in 2015. And as we approached 2021, we took that even further and announced our 2025 goals, which looks at eliminating continuous flaring, looks at improving our energy efficiency, our water efficiency, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and of course reducing our waste. And then all that aligns as well with our 2030 targets of 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and 30% improvement in our energy efficiency roadmap. So in addition to that, the environmental sustainability side, we are a polyolefins producer, so drive towards a circular economy is very fundamental to us as a company as well. And then, of course, the corporate social responsibility aspects, being a corporate citizen. You mentioned the human rights issues as well, so making sure that everyone working under our roof gets treated in the same way and the same principles that we expect for our own workers. So, of course, there will be more to come in the panel, so I pass on to my colleague here.
Hi, I'm Nahla Nabil. I work for Etihad Rail. So initially, I would like to thank the event organizers and your excellencies for giving us the opportunity to showcase the sustainability efforts that Etihad Rail are actually doing. So I'm just going to give you a quick brief on Etihad Rail. We've been established back in 2009. When our aim is to connect the UAE network, and hence also is going to play a very important role in connecting the GCC. Currently, as we are speaking, we're when the network is complete, it's going to be around 1,200 kilometers. We currently have stage 1 that has been operational since 2016, and it's covering through the western region at 264 kilometers, working to transport our sulfur granules all the way to be exported through our ports. Our stage 2, which is currently being in construction, is going to be linking Saudi Arabia through Ruwaifat on the west, and is going to link all the way up to the Fujairah. So it's going to link the whole UAE up to Fujairah on the east. That being said, we ensure throughout the processes of Etihad Rail, throughout our activities, our life cycle, that sustainability is part of every single step, whether it's through the environment, whether through it's our people, our community. One of the most important things is our vision and mission actually portrays how sustainability is extremely important, and how sustainability is given exactly the same importance and the same leverage as our economic benefits. I'll take you through, hopefully with the questions, about the achievements that the actual railway is going to be contributing to the low emission economy in the UAE. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So we've heard a rich diversity of interesting parts of industry and the transport sector, and how they all contribute, and the types of solutions that they're pushing for. So I'd like to start off first with Ralph, DHL. You use all kinds of transport when you're transporting all of our presents to our families and loved ones, etc. Which one is the most challenging in terms of air pollution and clean air for you?
So I guess everyone can guess. Yeah. So the air transport is obviously the most polluting mode of transport. when we worked on our sustainability roadmap, obviously first we needed to make a stock take. Where are we starting from? And DHL today emits around 33.3 million tons of CO2 every year. That sounds like a lot. And out of this, more than 60% is coming from air freight. Then you have around 20% coming from road. You have then around 10% coming from ocean freight. And you have the remaining 2% which comes from our real estates that we obviously have worldwide, because we also operate more than 2 million square meters of warehousing. So this obviously contributes to that as well. But interestingly, the air freight is the largest pollution driver, which we see in these numbers quite impressively. Yeah.
So how are you working with airlines, and are you finding alternatives to air transport?
Yeah, obviously. So when we talk about the 2030 target, 2050 target, and become carbon neutral, so there are two elements which you need to focus on. First is burn less. Yeah? That's the first target. And if we burn, then ideally burn with sustainable fuel. Yeah. So DHL itself, we are an airline. We operate 280 freighter aircraft. And we obviously work also with partners like Swiss and the Lufthansa Group and Emirates and Etihad here in the countries and others. So there are a lot of dialogues happening now, and DHL committed to use sustainable aviation fuel in the extent of more than 30% within the next years until 2030. So we work with fuel providers, but we also work then with the airlines that go with us together on that journey and support us in a similar extent, using more sustainable fuel. So that's how our deal with the airlines. But we will also have another question, I guess, coming later on. What else can we do in order to emit less on the air freight part?
Excellent. Okay. Well, on staying on the airlines topic, Serkan, you mentioned about the Lufthansa Group, which is pretty big. So what are the key measures being taken to reduce your carbon footprint as an airline?
Yeah, there are actually different elements which we need to consider, or which we already consider while reaching our targets to become carbon neutral till 2050 and half an hour carbon till 2030. So one major element is actually the renewal of the fleet, yeah, to send well-deserved older aircrafts into retirement, actually, but at the same time look also into fuel or newer aircrafts, fuel-efficient aircrafts like from Airbus, the A350s, which we also just got into our fleets here, so to focus on newer aircrafts. But plus on top to focus on the different technologies which we can make use of. There is a big chemical German company, BASF, which a lot of people are familiar with. With them we have developed kind of a shark skin technology to put on our wings, actually, to also burn less fuel on our flights, which will be also extended to all our cargo air freight aircrafts also in the near future, which will also help us to save actually the fuel consumption on our flights. A second major aspect is, of course, sustainable aviation fuel. Yeah? Here we are ready to take over a leading role across the entire value chain to produce this sustainable aviation fuel. But here we also need to consider actually the respective prices and availabilities in the future. Another major aspect are operational processes, which we closely follow up and try to improve. But also when it comes to air traffic management from regulatory perspective, to think about a single European sky, to have direct flight paths within Europe instead of having the different air traffic controls spread throughout the country. And on top, we are highly concentrating on offsetting and of CO2 emissions. Therefore, we have also a partnership with a Zurich-based company, My Climate, where our customers can actually take care of their CO2 emissions which they produce with a flight and offset them against respective fee, and support actually also the creation of sustainable aviation fuel here.
Great, thank you. So just on, when you mentioned sustainable aviation fuel, is that biofuel, if I understand correctly?
Yeah, it goes into that direction. Actually, when it comes to
Okay.
biofuel, we started years ago already in Germany with trying biofuel on a route between Frankfurt and Hamburg. It was back in 2011. So it's not just a new development. We are following up on this topic on new types of kerosene actually since many years. And now with this sustainable aviation fuel, we're focusing again on Swiss International Airlines. It's the first commercial airline in Switzerland using sustainable aviation fuel over there, which supports us again to reach our targets.
And how does it reduce air pollution in particular?
Yeah, it depends on the share actually of sustainable aviation fuel which we use on our flights. Yeah, so we also set a target of that we reach a share of 5 to 10% till 2030 when it comes to usage of sustainable aviation fuel. Currently, it's 5 times more expensive than classic kerosene, classic fuel. So here we're also dependent and need support actually to reduce the prices for the creation development of this fuel and to put more emphasis on the scientific methodologies actually. But this will, depending on the share, reduce it to a certain extent.
Great, thank you. So, Nahla, if I could ask you just a bit about Etihad Rail. So you mentioned, since you completed the first stage of Etihad Rail, have you noticed a reduction in road traffic as a result of that?
Yeah, well, initially, yes. We
Yeah.
did see a lot of reduction. And, their excellencies has already told us about how railway facilitates, is one of the safer modes. And, so it makes it easier for us to introduce what those the railway has actually done in stage one. So in stage one, which has been in inception and since 2016, is a real example of how environmental savings are going to be seen through railway. So one of the most important things is we've managed to transport around 39 million tons of sulfur. With that perspective, we've actually, each freight train took around 300 trucks off the road. So as we speak, we've actually managed to take around 2.4 million trips off the road, equating to around 324,000 tons of CO2s. So yes, we definitely have seen a lot of change, and this is only on our stage one, and we foresee much more in our stage two through the connections with the UAE.
Interesting. And your fleet uses diesel, yeah?
Yes.
As well, yeah. So in terms of your calculations, have you seen a drop overall in diesel use for road transport? Is that net, I guess, what I'm asking?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So that would have reduced air
a lot
pollutants
of the
as well.
CGSGs, yes.
Okay. So how does the UAE National Railway Network contribute to sustainable development in the country?
Well, in general, the railway, as everyone knows, the railway will connect everywhere in the UAE. It's going to connect the UAE, it's going to be connecting the GCC, and it's going to definitely boom the industries around it. With that being said, there will be a lot of growth, whether it's through job diversification or a lot of industries in the area, and this was very evident in our stage one in Al Dhafra region, the western region. In the western region, when the train came, we've actually promoted connectivity over there, and we've created little economic communities, making it more self-sustained. There's a lot of new businesses that has opened over there, which just boosts the economy on that area. So I'm always giving you the example of the stage one, which is currently operational, and we're foreseeing a major magnitude in the stage two.
Excellent. What's stage two? Is it kind of a UAE and regional rail network,
so
or
So the stage two is going to be connecting. It's going to connect the Saudi Arabia. So it's going to go there's stage from the west side is going to be connecting Ghuwaifat. All right, and then on the east side is going to go all the way up to Fujairah. Now, we've actually managed to break the project into multiple packages because that's a big space, big network. So we've managed to break it into 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D, and we have currently just completed the construction of our package A in the stage 2 just recently.
Great. Actually, while we're on the rail question, it's interesting because I don't know how many in the room have taken the metro here. Hands up in Dubai. Okay, well, that's pretty impressive, actually. Yeah, that's great. So part of the issue I've found sometimes the metro is, how do you get to the stations from your home, especially in the hot summer months, kind of waiting for the bus? It adds your extra kind of time. And I know this is an area that you've been looking at as Etihad Rail, haven't you, in terms of considering people can go to the train at the start location and the finish, the time spent for travel and apps. So what other mobility plans do you have around this?
So we are definitely pro, the whole end-to-end business case, or how to ensure that station to station it will not be sufficient. So what we're currently working very closely with a lot of the authorities, we're doing a lot of forecasting, we're working with a lot of customers to understand what is it that, how can we get them and convince them into that end-to-end process. We're working with authorities, the planning authorities in the UAE to ensure that we are integrating our mobility throughout the whole in the UAE, including also ports and free zone areas.
Great, thank you. I'm sure we can touch more on this in the Q&A with the audience as well. But I'd like to now go to Meta from Borouge. Now, obviously, you mentioned, you're kind of a different part of the supply chain when it comes to transport in terms of your work on producing plastics and olefins. So how do Borouge's solutions contribute to energy efficiency and for the transportation sector and logistics?
Thank you, Tanzid. Yeah, I'm sure you're not the only one with that question. What's a polyolefin producer doing in this panel? Well, we're a customer and we're a supplier to the industry. I mentioned we are a joint venture with ADNOC and Borealis, and we provide value-adding innovative solutions that cater to multiple industries, mobility, agriculture, infrastructure, energy, healthcare, packaging. And we have customers all over the world. Our customers cater, our customers span from Middle East, Africa, to the Asia Pacific regions. So, we're very much feeding in, we very much depend on the transportation industry, but also, as I mentioned, our solutions go into it. Looking at cars and looking at the car manufacturers globally, more and more are using plastic components in the cars to improve their fuel efficiencies, and thereby reducing the carbon dioxide emissions that go into the environment. In fact, with the addition of plastic components in cars, you have a reduction of about 10 million tons of CO2 per year that goes into the environment. Moving into the energy side, so the plastic coating that goes on the energy cables, feeds into the Etihad Rail network, and has also, provided savings of carbon dioxide emissions. Looking on the packaging, so you look at the DHL and the likes. So our packaging industry, we were very proud of a recent innovation a couple of years ago now with one of our Asia Pacific customers, where we collaborated to come up with another, there's global challenges all around us, and packaging is no exception. What can we do with these courier bags? So we piloted a project in 2019 with one of our partners in China on that, the courier bag to be able to be reused as a shopping bag, so to increase the life of that product. So these are just examples of how our products go into different segments of the transportation and logistics industry.
How interesting. Now, thank you for pointing that out. And actually, you mentioned that you're contributing to the circular economy as well, to some of the work that you're doing. Your business is plastics, and that's obviously an issue from a sustainability perspective. So how do you see your plastic production being part of a circular economy then?
So a little bit off topic, but it's okay. I'll take that.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's something I'm very passionate about, and there are a lot of misconceptions that do exist. Plastics are terrible, and but the reality is, without plastics, we couldn't survive. It's all around us. I mean, we're able to have this panel today as a result of plastic components. We're just coming out of a global pandemic, but you know, look at how plastics have allowed us to, you know, to overcome this. Whether it is from technology that allowed us, you know, to immediately shift to a remote working, but or going to the healthcare. You know, the wipes that you're using are masks, sanitizers. It's all around us. I mentioned already a few, you know, the value of it, whether it's in the mobility or infrastructure, energy. The problem is the indiscriminate use that some people have with littering. You know, that personal ownership. It's very easy to pass the buck and then blame it on an industry. But ultimately what it comes down to is personal ownership. However, having said that, we do realize that, you know, in order to achieve this zero waste economy, and in order to achieve any, you know, any sustainability related goal or target, what is needed is strong and concerted cross-value chain collaboration. We all have to work together. Industry, community, government, society, NGOs, everyone needs to come together. And Your Excellency, you mentioned that as well. You know, it's working together to come up with that solution. We recently, not recently anymore, in 2017, we partnered with Borealis, Systemic, Nova Chemicals, Nestle, and a number of other value chain partners to launch Project Stop in Southeast Asia. Project Stop is now being used as an example on how to address this issue and how to stop that tap on ocean plastic. Initially, we launched it in one city, where we create this infrastructure where it's not just a cleanup, but rather building that infrastructure, creating waste segregation and waste collection in places that didn't exist before, and preventing the leakage of waste into the oceans. Today we've expanded that to 3 cities, and we're further looking at opportunities to expand. In addition to, of course, incorporating recyclates into our product portfolio, working with our value chain partners to design for recyclabilities. Many of our customers have made commitments to incorporate fully recyclable or recycled content in their products, and we're working hand in hand with them to achieve those goals.
Great, thank you. And you know, I appreciate that was a surprise question, but an interesting message you gave there was about working with your supply chain, and you mentioned a few examples with the transport sector and what you're doing as well. So back on the topic of kind of air quality, I wanted to just, I do have more questions here, but I wanted to just do a quick time check with the team. We're okay, yeah? So we've got some questions from the audience as well. So the gentleman over there, if you could stand up and introduce yourself and keep your question brief if possible, and I'll repeat it to the team.
My name is Steve Christie. I just have a question for Ralph. Recently, I came back from Bangkok, and in my part of the aircraft, I was alone. So I was wondering how optimized is the freight. And my question is, do you have an application or something online that can allow the aircraft, the airlines to fill the gaps and allow forwarders to fill the gaps? If this would be a good optimization.
Great. So just for the sake of the online audience, I have to repeat the question. So how optimized is the aircraft when when there's freight, and if you're alone, or like you experienced recently? So is there some kind of technology that you use to address that?
So actually, it's a very good question. If such an airline, I don't know with which airline you flew from Bangkok here back to the UAE, but if it's dead empty, of course, it's not profitable at all for an airline. Yeah, it's not profitable from revenue perspective. It's not good from sustainability perspective to fly with empty aircrafts around. But there might be different options. Even if you can't see the passengers on board, there might be a huge cargo shipment on this flight actually, which is then important. And then how to fill this actually. Yes, we as airlines, we have different ways of distributing tickets, yeah, through our classic travel agencies, etc., through our online channels. But just to fill on last minute or to fill the flight completely. Yeah, there are no major central apps available looking at all the availabilities on different aircrafts, different airline brands, etc. to say, look, let's shift all the passengers now to this one aircraft. There are not such partnerships existing nowadays.
My question is about cargo, not about
It's about cargo.
Yeah.
Sorry. I got it for passengers actually.
I was wondering because I saw that it was empty in my part of the aircraft, and I
Yeah.
said, is cargo optimized or not? This was
Mm.
my reflection. So my question is about cargo.
About
Because here it's more easy to optimize.
Ralph,
So
that might be-
I gladly take that up, talking now both as an airline customer as well as operating our own airline. And I can promise you at the moment, since the pandemic broke out, every little cubic meter and kilogram is fully booked out. In fact, some airlines are operating passenger aircraft just with cargo. But I'm also very honest from an environmental perspective. It's not very smart having empty passenger cargo aircrafts flying only with the belly capacity loaded. But some airlines converted these aircrafts even. So they took the seats out and then they put and the cargo technically in the passenger compartment. Interesting enough, they still have to fly with cabin crew because there's no fire suppression system. So there are certain regulations which have to be fulfilled. But to answer that, what we operate, so we have a global IT platform, and this is, it sounds pretty basic, but don't forget, we operate in more than 200 countries. So having all countries operating on one system platform, making shipments, visibility, and transparent. So DHL operates the big hub in Leipzig for Europe and Cincinnati in the US. And we have a very good transparency of the incoming cargo from all around the world feeding into these hubs, which allows us obviously to have an optimized planning outbound. And this is really, I think your topic is very, very interesting because this leads us to one of the topics how we can emit less and planning well ahead. But I'm also, I mean, the airline partners will not hear that or wouldn't like to do that, but the less air freight we have, obviously, the better it is for the environment. And there are also solutions now, for example, from Asia to Europe. We operate block trains. We have transferred a lot of cargo that used to fly on aircraft on trains because the transit time by plane with the pickup and delivery takes around 4 to 5 days. With a rail, we can achieve 15 to 20 days, and the ship will last at least 35 to 40 days with all the backhaul as well. So that is also one of the ways on how to emit less and save CO2. Yeah.
How interesting, yeah. Gentleman over there, if you could introduce yourself and... So just for the online audience, the question, and anyone in the room who didn't hear, the question was, some of the technologies that you're looking to implement will require more investment. Does that affect your competitiveness and potentially the offering you provide your customers being more expensive? If I summarize, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I would like to come back what I said before when it comes to sustainable aviation fuel, which is 5 times more expensive nowadays. Now, of course, we run a survey just now with our customers and ask their willingness to pay for sustainability-related measures for carbon offsetting, and I'm curious to see the outcome out of this survey later, because at the moment I would expect actually that if we would tell our customers you need to pay 30% more just to fly carbon neutral, there wouldn't be that much customers who are willing to pay this at the moment. Actually, we are on a way or on a journey right now to get there. Yeah, but one of the major challenges which we face is actually that we need to take our customers but also our employees and all our stakeholders on this journey with us, to communicate the respective ideas and measures which we have. But it's super important that we partner up with local companies like here in the UAE we do, for sustainable aviation fuel to produce this, because this is the way to go, this is the future, and we want to be part of it actually, and we want to support this initiative. We set our clear goals for us, not just to have it on paper and just to shine with it. No, we really put emphasis and really follow these targets, and there is a certain investment which we need to take from our side as well. But we believe with all the different measures which we will invest or take here, we will get to our targets. But there will be not only this one big measure which will just turn the coin. There are a lot of different smaller initiatives actually which will then make the difference at the end of the day. But I think it's worth to invest into this future.
Thank you.
We invest in more fuel-efficient aircraft. When it comes to Swiss International Airlines, it's we have the youngest and most modern fleet in Switzerland when it comes to Swiss International. So means also that we operate with aircrafts which consume less fuel, which helps us at the end of the day again. So there are different sides which need to be considered. Also the investments on sustainable aviation fuel on the one hand side, but also which type of aircrafts, how we renew our fleets, how we optimize our procedures and processes there.
Ralph, you had something to say on this.
So we have pretty much quantified our cost, at least until 2030, what the achievement of our sustainable targets will cost. So I mentioned it in the beginning, we emit like 33.3 million, and we want to achieve by 2030 an emission of less than 29 million. Don't forget, in the next 10 years, we have very aggressive expansion and growth plans, which is already included in that. And we quantified our cost, which will be roughly around 7 billion euros, which we will invest into our sustainability programs, which means, for example, the renewal of the fleet. So we ordered already 18 new 777, which are about to be delivered. It's the investment in the electrification of our last mile delivery fleet. It is the buying of sustainable fuel. So we have certain products, for example, our less than container load product goes already as our product called Go Green Plus, which runs on sustainable fuel, and this comes with additional cost. So is this a competitive disadvantage? Well, it is a cost, but don't forget, our purpose is connecting people, improving lives. We need to keep world trade going. We're not saying that we want to reduce world trade, but we might have to do it in a more sustainable way, and this will come at a cost. So if you don't invest now, what will happen if we don't? At some point of time, maybe world trade will not happen to the extent as it is now, or it might shrink again. So on a short-term perspective, it increases our cost, but on a long-term perspective, hopefully it guarantees that we all can enjoy bananas from the Philippines and steaks from somewhere else in the world and enjoy the life that we have today. So your question is very good, because on short term, it is an increase in cost. But your question was about competitiveness. I also have to answer, a lot of customers are expecting it nowadays. So if you don't become more sustainable, maybe you will also be eliminated by your customers and end consumer demand, because I believe most end consumers today also want to see more sustainability action happening also from the private industry. And this is, I think, how it all links very nice together. European Union and other legislation worldwide set the framework, set the targets. They will have to help us as a private industry to work on these targets. When we talk about the electrification, doesn't help if I have battery-powered cars powered by a coal mine next door. This won't help. So we also need more green energy. We need ways in order to buy more sustainable aviation fuel, sustainable maritime fuel, and I think here everything links nicely together. You set the framework, and we, the large corporations in the world, we then make it happen so that the end consumer also benefits. So competitive disadvantage, I don't think so. It is a cost, but it's planned, it's budgeted, and we do this to be long-term sustainable in our industry.
Great, thank you. Mate and Nahla, do either of you have any comments on this part of the conversation?
No, but I think just to summarize, but just defining what sustainability is, and Ralph very much said that. It's having that balance and remembering that sustainability doesn't just mean environment, but it's that triple bottom line of balancing, the needs of society and connecting people as well, balancing with the economic and balancing with the environment. So just bringing it all back together, not one pillar of sustainability at the expense of another. So I think it was very well framed.
Actually, I was just going to say, similar to what you were saying, because you were talking about plastics and how important, the plastics are, especially, with the COVID and everything. Plastics are important. How sustainability is, we keep on forgetting. I mean, it has to be balanced. Environment is very important. However, we need to ensure that, our society is benefiting and also the economy is benefiting. So when you literally were talking about this, I was like, yeah, that's exactly it.
Great, thank you. I have a lot of questions I want to ask, but I see the audience is more and more engaged, so I want to put my own questions aside and see what the audience has. Anyone? Questions, hands up? Kyle at the front, and then the gentleman behind you.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. So hi, my name's Kyle. I am part of a startup here in the UAE called EV Lab, and we're trying to promote electric vehicles in general, but we're approaching a very consumer sort of a market, but I think the commercial side is really critical. I'm also aware that the CO2 emissions of the average individual here in the UAE are ridiculous. I mean, we're 15 tons and probably the more eco-conscious of us, but we need to get down to 2 tons. So maybe what my question is to you guys is, what can we as individuals, as part of this ecosystem do, and what maybe as a startup could we contribute to you all as UAE-based companies and sometimes international companies that would help you to achieve your goals? Yeah.
Great, thanks, Kyle. So the question was, what can we as individuals do and then what can startups and companies in the UAE do to help contribute to your goals?
Well, very important, I love the question, but because usually a lot of people will get solutions and innovations from different parts of the world and will expect it just to fit in here perfectly. And that's not always right. So a lot of those innovations actually need to be catered to the UAE to ensure that we fit the UAE requirements. And what we've seen, or I personally have seen with a lot of startups is like, it works somewhere else, but it not might work here. So we need to switch or a little bit, just work on our aspects just to cater it for the UAE.
I couldn't agree more. Going to what can we do as individuals, I'd say is be responsible. Take ownership, take accountability. We ran a survey a few years ago now where we asked society, whose responsibility is it to address the issue of waste and marine litter? Shockingly, over 50% said it was industry and government and not their own. And I think that mindset needs to shift, that it's all of our responsibility collaboratively. Be responsible. Use what you want. Don't use what you want. If you're 3 people in the same household is going to the same event, you don't need to go in 3 cars. You need to go in 1 car. So it's that mindset, I would say, a responsible consumption, responsible behavior of, do I really need it? Do I really need to take, those 3 cars?
But what we can do as companies or from the private sector is also to promote this thinking, these ideas within our group of employees as well. Yeah, what we do within Lufthansa Group, we started it a few years ago to promote these cleanup days which are happening. Yeah, also these World Climate Days to run different initiatives throughout the world. I mentioned before we have 110,000 employees worldwide. And if you start with the small things and to promote these ideas, and I'm fully with you, it need to start with each and every individual, and we need to create this mindset actually. So from company perspective, we can trigger this actually to start with our group of colleagues and employees, but then at the end it must result at each and every individual, and then it would come back to your point.
Sorry, you triggered something. I'd say do your research as well. Today, we have so many environmentally friendly, and I say this in inverted commas, alternatives, but the reality is, no, they're not. They're actually so much worse. It's just an alternative of the harm that you cannot see. And I go back to the plastic industry because that's what we're in. And when you're talking about, single-use plastics, which we shouldn't have, and avoidable single-use plastics, but you have people who think that a environmentally sustainable option is to replace that single-use plastic bag with a biodegradable or oxo-biodegradable bag. The reality is, no, that actually causes microplastics, and it actually has been banned in the European Union. Or using a cotton bag as opposed to that plastic bag. Very successful in Europe is the LDPE bag for life, so the thicker plastic bags, because the reality is you would need to use that cotton bag close to 200 times to have an equal environmental footprint compared to that one single-use plastic bag. So it's do your research. Don't just believe the hype of what's the buzzword or what's happening on social media. And that's part of what I said is be responsible.
Great. I'd like to, bring it back. I know we've gone on to a few different topics, but back to the topic of clean air, and in particular, something you were saying, Ralph, the role of government in setting the policies and the standards, and industry kind of operates within that, and the experience you've had in Europe. Do you find that approach works in the Middle East and Africa region? Has that been happening here for you? Are you facing any challenges there?
Well, obviously, the Middle East and Africa is a very diverse region, yeah. So I believe here, in particular, the UAE and the Gulf countries appear to be more advanced. The UAE just announced their similar 2050 carbon neutral targets. So we talk the same language here. We have the same ambition. Obviously, some countries in Africa will not be able to bring this on the same level. But we also, and here again, the industry has come up with ideas on how to also serve these markets here and make it more sustainable. Yeah. For example, we just invested here in UAE. We cover all our 200,000 square meters with solar panels. We have a certain disadvantage in the market. It sounds strange. We have a lot of sun. That is actually good. But it's also very dusty, which reduces the efficiency of the solar panels. So that's a disadvantage. But we have also a big advantage. Other than in Europe, where you have your peak consumptions at night, our peak consumption is midday time, because most of our facilities are air conditioned. So we use the majority of electricity when it's actually produced. This is very good. And when we talk about then the other markets, we talked about emitting less and using, for example, sustainable aviation fuel or sustainable maritime fuel, which we can anticipate will be easier available in Europe, in the US, and Asia, and most likely it will take a bit more time to get similar done in Africa. But we also worked out a concept where we as DHL commit with a certain airline, that can be an American airline, a European airline, to buy a certain amount of sustainable fuel, and we can trade that like a emission certificate. So we can also, for example, allow a fashion manufacturer out of Ethiopia shipping to Europe to also have the benefit of a low emission or less emission product by trading this emission certificates on this particular lane. Yeah. So to answer your question, the Middle East Africa is very diverse. It's not one fits all. And obviously the lower hanging fruits are I see in Europe, where I think with the topic of green energy and sustainability, we are already much more advanced than in Africa. But the Gulf countries are very fast in picking up and just setting the same goal. And we see the mindset here to be sustainable is there. We have the biggest solar plant here just around the corner. So also the drive here to have clean and sustainable energy is obviously there, which would help us as a private industry to also offer then sustainable products.
Great, thank you. We have a gentleman in the back who's been waiting patiently. If you could... Oh, hi, Ahmed.
We represent the private sector, represent more than 120 companies from across the region and political privilege. So I have a question for Nana based on your question, Tanzil, of who is using the network. I actually already use the network. I'm 27 and I never had a driving license. So
all my commute is using the rail network. Now I want to go to Abu Dhabi. There's no train. We speak about hyperloop, but we need something now. So hyperloop is need too many years to get to the commercial side of having a hyperloop. So when we can have actually trains for people, not for goods. So goods, great, we are reducing emissions, but for people as well, I think we need to commute. Another question for Serkan, just to be very quick. I don't know if you have a say on the ground fleet in the airports. If you as a company, like airline and companies, you have a say to electrify the fleet, the ground fleet in the airports, but it's totally owned by the airport. So I don't know if you own and if so, what's your plans that you actually have some electric fleet? Because I think it's the lowest hanging fruit, so you have this fleet, the technology is there, and economically it's achievable as well. So what are you planning?
Great questions, Ahmed. Thank you. So the first one was directed to you, Nahla, about are there plans for some kind of a high-speed passenger rail network, which has been my dream for the last 13 years in the UAE, to cut that journey time from Dubai to Abu Dhabi and elsewhere. And then the second question for you, Serkan, was about as an airline, do you have any power and kind of to negotiate with the airports around electrifying their ground fleet?
All right, that's a very good question. I was waiting for it, so everyone wants to know. Well, initially our infrastructure was built to cater for both the freight and the passengers, so that's the good news. So the infrastructure extending across the 1,200 kilometers is actually catered for that. Meanwhile, we're prioritizing freight due to local requirements and local needs in the UAE. So at the moment, it's on freight, but future passengers you'll probably be hearing from in the future. That's it, sorry.
Right. It's coming. Watch the space.
Thank you very much for the question. Actually, while mentioning a few minutes ago that a lot of single steps and processes are needed to reach our targets, I had also this topic of electrified cars at the airports in mind. Yeah, at some airports we have already pushback wagons. These are the big trucks, so to say, which push back the aircrafts to the runway. Actually, the classic ones, they consume, of course, a lot of fuel as they need to push back a huge aircraft and need a lot of energy for it. So there are airports using also electrified pushback cars, actually, and it's also in the own interest of an airport to introduce more and more vehicles-based or electrical vehicles there on ground as well to save costs on their side as well. So I would say, actually, when it comes to our hubs, there we have a bigger interaction or cooperation, of course, with the respective airports. Yeah, but when it comes to other airports where we just fly in, there we are also highly dependent as a Lufthansa Group now on the local circumstances and what they have locally. But together with the big hubs in Europe, be it Zurich, Vienna, Munich or Frankfurt, and even Brussels, there we are in close interaction with the respective airports and the authorities. Definitely.
Thanks, Serkan. So I'd like to invite a few colleagues from the Ministry of Climate Change if you have any remarks on the conversation that you'd like to make.
Some of your dream might come true when you ask about policies and regulation and that part from the government as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, I was just about to say that. So Etihad Rail works closely with the government entities. So yes, we work closely with the Ministry of Climate Change to ensure that we are all aligned towards the strategy and the vision of 2030.
Thank you. And Dr. Diana Francis, you had a comment as well.
So I'm Dr. Diana Francis from Khalifa University. I'm the head of the Environmental and Geophysical Sciences Lab. So I'm here more from the academia and research perspective to hear all what the private sector and the government has to say or do also on the topic of air quality, and it's linked to climate change because we all know that they are both related. I had the pleasure to participate to the previous panel where we touched more on the air quality and climate change interrelation. And I would say that, I mean, we as scientists and academia, we are pretty much looking forward to all the actions that are going to happen in the UAE particularly and in the region also. Very happy to hear about the Etihad rail that will connect all the countries. And I mean, for every scientist that was, I wonder why there is no trains in the region for many years. So this is very good to hear. And also, I'm very happy to hear about all the initiatives at Borouge regarding the flares, containing the flares and all that. Very great to hear about the biofuel, and this also will trigger some new ideas for us on the research side to investigate more what could be the impact of such initiatives taken by the different sectors on the air quality. Thank you so much for this event. Very, very great.
Could I just comment on that? Thank you for being here. Academia is, you know, it's a key stakeholder with industry, and with Borouge and ADNOC as well, that's no different. In fact, we actually, as part of the ADNOC Knowledge Bridge initiative, we're actually running some sessions with Khalifa University towards the end of this month. So it will be accredited course as well on polyolefins and sustainable consumption and circular economy. So we're looking forward to working with you closely as well.
Great, thank you. And we have time for one more question, yeah? 5 more minutes, yeah? Okay, great. Thank you. The lady at the back, if you could introduce yourself and ask your question, please. So I guess she was looking at the two gentlemen here. So who wants to take that question first? It was about carbon neutrality. Is it within your organization, and how much is offsetting as well?
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, no worries. I take two. I have so much to say on this topic, so I take two. No, it's okay. So actually, when it comes to our own organization and looking at airlines itself, we as an airline will not be carbon neutral to 100%. We definitely need additional supporting projects actually to reach our targets at the end of the day. And this Zurich-based company, My Climate, and Compensate we are working with, they support, for example, in 9 different countries such sustainable projects which are also measurable. They are supporting the rainforest in a country. They're looking at gorilla reservoirs, actually, where we can safeguard actually the environment there to reach carbon neutrality. So we offer our customers, we support these initiatives, but plus offer our customers to support these initiatives as well, while redeeming their points or paying additional fees to be carbon neutral. But we as company it's just one part. We will do our utmost actually to optimize our processes and to renew our fleets, etc. So we'll do our utmost, but we are also highly dependent on additional projects actually to support our goals to reach this carbon neutrality until 2050.
So the topic you explained is the offsetting versus the insetting. So let's say offsetting means I emit a certain amount of CO2 and I offset it, for example, by building trees. Yeah? I think I read somewhere, maybe the scientists can help me, I think you need like, for 1 ton, you need to plant like 6 trees to absorb that. So for us as a company, that forest would be so large, we cannot do this with offsetting, obviously. It's one element, but it's not the core of the strategy. The core of the strategy is the insetting. And here I have certain areas. As you said, our target is 2050 to be emission free. And companies like ours have now developed plans what we will do until 2030, which will reduce the emissions to some double-digit extent. Yeah? That means with, for example, sustainable aviation fuel or sustainable maritime fuel, this is ideally carbon neutral, generated out of waste. So it's not, it should be carbon neutral, but it will not replace entire fuel. It's a plug-in fuel. It can replace, I think, up to 30 or 40% the kerosene, but cannot completely eliminate it. There are already tasks, I know in Germany they're researching about synthetic kerosene, which would be 100% sustainable. That could replace kerosene, but it's still in development stage and in a pilot stage. What might work, and this is again where we need the legislation around it, when I, for example, can feed my electric vehicles with green energy, this is indeed carbon neutral. So this will help us to significantly reduce our emissions on the last mile in city areas. When we talk about clean air to breathe, I think the city areas in the last mile is for sure one focus area. This will work, yeah? So the electrification, I think from a technology point of view, we have already 20,000 electric vehicles out on the road. So I think from a technology perspective, nothing is holding us back. Indeed, the cars will, over the next generations to come, will become much better and more efficient. But the core element is the energy that I use in there has to be carbon neutral. So there's no way in having a coal plant outside the city and I then use the coal produced energy for my electric vehicles, then I'm not carbon neutral. But this is where obviously we try to work a lot with solar, we try to work with biofuels, we work with fuel manufacturers, but this is just one milestone, yeah. And then I think this power to liquids, so the nitrogen propulsion, I think to reach our 2050 carbon neutral goal, also on aircraft we will have to talk about different ways of propulsion, which is still under development. But until 2030, the sustainable fuel will be the core element of most of our company strategy and the electrification of the vehicles. I hope that answered your question.
Great. Well, look, there's a lot of rich areas of this topic to explore, as you can see, you know, from a diversity of kind of areas. And, you know, I invite all the whoever's around to come to the reception afterwards and the tour. Maybe you get a chance to ask these questions one-on-one with everyone, exchange your details and so on. I'm going to start wrapping this up now because we have another really interesting presentation to come. But one of the things I guess that struck out for me on this conversation is that mobility is crucial for our livelihoods, our economies, our well-being as well. You know, whether it's, you know, in the last year and a half, you know, how easy it's been that we've taken for granted the ability to fly, to see loved ones who live in different parts of the world. And when that gets affected, you know, we rely on that industry a lot, but it's also easy to criticize that industry because aviation does rely a lot on fossil fuels, which produces pollution. So the industry is beginning to change, and it's encouraging to hear that. But it's also important to see mobility in an integrated way, where you think, well, what happens after you get off your flight? The road transport or the rail transport that you take till you get to your home in a decent hour, so you're not tired at the end of the day. So there's aspects to mobility and clean air that's very interconnected here. We all breathe the same air, it's a shared common good, but it can also be something that, because it's a common good, we can all be responsible for polluting it and point fingers at others to do this, that they're responsible for doing that. It's the classic tragedy of the commons, so to speak. And but there's solutions out there. There's innovation. There's new technologies coming on board. I guess I'd like to leave one departing comment and thought for the audience is it really happening fast enough? Now, you think about a crisis that we're facing, we've been facing as a planet for the last year and a half, the COVID pandemic. No one thought the vaccines could be developed that quickly. But when the political will was there and the funding was there on the table, vaccines were developed much more quickly than we ever thought possible, with a lot more scientific collaboration. So if that kind of effort and funding is expended towards helping industries and helping the planet tackle issues like air quality and climate change, then maybe we can actually find solutions much more quickly. And those goals that these gentlemen and the corporates are setting could be achieved even more quickly. So I'd say there's a lot of optimism there in terms of lessons that we can learn from the last year and a half. And with that, I'd like to pass on to Francisca now to introduce the last part of this session. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Tanzid, but also the panelists. Really, in the name of the Swiss Embassy and the European Embassy and of our ambassadors, thank you very much. It was very insightful, great discussion. I learned a lot. I hope the audience too, and also to Tanzid for your excellent moderation again. Thank you. I think this deserves an applause. And before we go to a short presentation, a very interesting one from Igor from the ICRC, I would still take the chance to say a big thank to Taina Sateri, our trade counselor at the UN delegation, EU delegation, to Hanina Ben-Bernou, regional advisor at the EU, to Setare Bucher over there, a public diplomacy officer at the Swiss Embassy, and to Farah Naba, standing there, for all their background work that they did to make this event possible. Thank you very much. So now it's my pleasure to give the floor to the ICRC, the guardian and disseminator of the international humanitarian law. It's very much to our heart because Switzerland has a big humanitarian tradition. So we are very happy that you give us that you will give us also a presentation from the point of view ICRC humanitarian about this discussion, air pollution, what it means for the poorest and most vulnerable people, and also that you show us the good connection that you have also in collaboration with the private sector. Thank you. You do it alone, or shall I do it?
No, do it myself. Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, and thanks a lot for inviting us. Thanks, Ambassador Baggi, and thanks, Ambassador Fontana. I feel particularly at home here since I work for a Swiss organization. I'm an European citizen, and I spent also a long time in the region. So thanks for inviting us, and I want really to give a few ideas on how we consider the topic of clean air for blue skies. The International Committee of the Red Cross has its own mandate to protect and assist the victims of the armed conflict. And as such, we are present in more than 100 countries with 18,000 staff members. So just for this image in a glance, you can imagine how we move by train, how we move by planes, and all the means that can be used to get closer to the conflict-affected communities. So there is something to start with, and is that when we are in conflict-affected settings, the social systems are weak and the governance as well. In that situation, environmental and climate risks are hitting harder. It's not a surprise that for the Notre Dame Gain Index, which measures the capacity of adaptation to climate change, some of the lowest country in that index are conflict-affected ones. We see that climate risks are in the region hitting very hard, but not only there. I took some pictures. These are pictures from the region. You can see some climate risks in place and some of the environmental degradation that it's quite widespread in the region and beyond. So clean air, why? For a long time, the humanitarian organizations like we are thought that being in the emergency mode, in the emergency response, the environment was not really a concern. But there is an important but. It's not really an issue of emergency. For example, the ICRC in the 10 biggest operation has been there for an average of 42 years. So there is certainly a long term to be considered. And from the point of view of what we are seeing, the toll that is taking climate and environmental risks on the conflict-affected communities, we think that is not only a moral, but also a practical reason to step in and lead by example in limiting the damage we cause to the environment. So as you saw, we are spread all over the world. We get closer to the different conflict-affected communities, and we do need to limit our environmental footprint. Specifically, we have tried to put also some indicators. We did the carbon accounting, and we would like to limit by 50% by 2030. How? Quickly, I want to show you some of the different actions that we are actually putting in place. So, as Ralph actually said, we have done also our carbon account. Definitely, if you can't measure the issue, you can't improve it. That's as obvious as it is. And so this exercise that cover basically the all greenhouses that we are emitting will help us in understanding in a sort of acupunctural way where we are gonna decrease that in order to meet this goal by 2030. One of the things that I want to highlight very much is the fact that we work with a lot of suppliers, more than 5,000. So the first thing is to work together with our suppliers. On the top left, it's a small project that I want to talk about. You can see at the top the old kitchen set packing with all the plastic and all the wrap that it implied. On the left side, you can see how it was rationalized, optimized, reducing the plastic and using only carton. On the top left, you can see a cultivation of palm oil. We purchased a lot of that, and we try to increase as much as possible the amount of palm oil that is produced in a sustainable way. Sustainability comes not only on the environmental side, as it was pertinently said during the panel. It comes also with a social component. And so we try to inject some standards in order to avoid the kind of situation of labor that are the ones that are on the top right. We move a lot. We have almost 4,800 vehicles among car, lorries, motorbikes, and also 20 planes. So one of the things that it's important is to optimize our fleet, and there is a big exercise ongoing, and this fleet has to be maintained and operated. So in terms of waste, we are going to optimize and to improve our waste management. when it comes to another important part of that cake of carbon accounting that I told you, it's our offices and residences. So 5 indicators: energy, paper, water, CO2, and waste, are normally monitored, and every year we try to improve those indicators. The buildings we are talking about normally are not very much energy efficient, and we try to increase that together with the component of decarbonization that normally goes along the lines of the renewable energies. Here you can see, for example, some solar panels on a roof of one of our residences. And with this very pixelated image that comes from our offices in Iraq, where they are planting trees, not simply for the idea of the carbon sink, but mostly for, I would say, decreasing the temperature of Iraq, that you may know goes highly over 50 degrees. So with this image, I want to just tell you about one initiative that we have been discussing here in the UAE to improve our capacities and to establish a water and energy knowledge center. What is about? It's a place where we want to increase as humanitarian our capacities in the field of decreasing greenhouse gases, energy, which is crucial in terms of that reduction, and water as well, which is something that it's cross-cutting and very important to serve our communities. Working better at the beginning means increase our capacities, but on the long run, this hub has the ambition to become a place for debate, to debate as we are doing here, to debate a topic like sustainable development, reduction of greenhouse gases, and most important, the impact of climate and environment on the conflict-affected community, which is basically what we care about. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Igor, for this, Igor Malgrati, for this very, very good input to round up the discussion about what is also humanitarian organizations doing for to reduce air pollution and for the environment. So now we come to the second part of the evening, and this is the voluntary guided tour through the Swiss Pavilion. Now, I have to ask you to have a look at your badges. When you turn it around, you have a number on it. And I know that there are some audience here who maybe has no number. So that's why I have to rapidly ask you. Who has a 1? Please just raise the 1. Good. 2. 3. Okay, so thank you. So the ones, I would say group number 3.